Tonight on Panorama, the human face of a European tragedy, where austerity means pharmacists run out of medicine.
I cannot sleep. I don't know if it is my fault and how I can solve this problem.
Ακόμα και σήμερα που σας μιλάω, δεν έχω πάρει τα φάρμακά μου. Δεν μπορώ να ζήσω χωρίς αυτά.
Where middle-class families rely on charity to feed their children.
Μερικές φορές σκέφτομαι ότι καλύτερα να πεθάνω.
Where fear of immigration is being stoked by the far right.
I'm scared. They hit me, they pinch.
Who are they?
Pakistan.
Last week's election result may have saved the euro for now.
This is a victory for all Europe.
But can the Greeks trust their leaders to get it right this time?
Those who have brought us to where we are today cannot possibly be the visionaries of tomorrow.
If not, how much longer will the people's patience hold out?
We have nothing. No jobs, no work. We have to rise up and fight.
In the run-up to the June election, I went to Greece to find out how the people are coping with a crisis that threatens to destroy their once comfortable existence. I've been coming here for the past 20 years, ever since my son Christopher moved here, back in the days when life was good.
All right.
We've seen this country change almost beyond recognition.
That's for rent, that's for rent. Kontsovolos has gone out of business. Half of them are empty, or they're for rent.
Since joining the euro 12 years ago, Greece has enjoyed the most spectacular boom. It's now suffering from an even more spectacular bust.
It's just decimated.
Some of the fruits of the wild and unchecked optimism created by that boom are still evident, at least on a superficial level. That's because the rich have held on to their wealth, and some are very rich indeed. It's the rest who've suffered, especially over the past 4 years. Their political leaders had delivered the seductive message that they could have it all without too much effort, and they believed them. It was William Beveridge who identified the 5 giant evils that threaten a nation: want, disease, squalor, idleness, ignorance. That was 70 years ago, and that nation was Great Britain. Those same giant evils threaten this nation today. When Christopher came here to work in a brand new orchestra in the early 90s, it seemed those giants had been slain.
So, Amy, you're going to tell me about the show.
How much more enticing for a young man was the prospect of the good life in the sun,
Wow.
with a guaranteed job, than dowdy old Britain still recovering from recession. Now he and his wife Peppy fear for the future of their young family. His salary has been slashed and the orchestra is fighting to survive. She works as a lawyer but never knows which clients will pay and which won't. Things were still good when we all decided 8 years ago to build a house in the Peloponnese. But now when I return and catch up with old friends,
Hey, Tassos.
Oh, hello.
Good to see you.
the mood has changed. My neighbours know what's to blame.
Here in Greece, the last 30 years, the half of the people go to live in Athens, easy life, with easy money. So we stop to product and to export.
So it's your fault, not the fault of the Germans, it's not the fault of...
No, we stop to think like Greeks. We want to do now holidays all the year, like the tourists. We easy work, like this.
What has to be done to get Greece out of trouble?
The problem in Greece, we need job, we need to work, to pay tax. You understand me? We have very, very big problem.
And are you worried?
I worry too much. Very, definitely. It's a very big problem.
Before Greece joined the European Union, 17% of its people worked in farming and fishing. Now it's 3%. Exports have fallen, imports have risen. The population of Athens has doubled in 2 generations, and the country has forgotten it has to earn its keep. My neighbour Nikos has to support 2 grown-up children in Athens because they're unemployed. For most of his life, he was a ship's engineer. He built up a good pension. He was enjoying his retirement when I first met him. Now he's struggling. Once he fished for the pleasure of it. Now it's from need.
Εγώ ταξίδευα 35 χρόνια στα καράβια.
I was on the ships for 35 years to earn a pension I could live on. I got about €1,000 a month and I had a good life.
Τώρα όμως μου κόβει με 300 παύσα.
Now they've cut my pension by €300. I have 2 children in Athens. Don't they need to eat? They are now unemployed.
Αυτοί δεν θέλουν νερό, δεν θέλουν αυτά. Είναι άνεργοι.
How are you managing to find the money?
Τι να το κάνω.
I couldn't manage. I bought that little boat to catch fish to eat. How will I live?
Πώς θα ζήσω εγώ εδώ πέρα.
Nikos is not alone. On average, pensions have been cut by 30%. It's estimated that 40% of Greeks could soon be living in poverty. Imagine that in Britain, 24 million people on the breadline.
Greek culture, classic literature, is suffused with morality tales, and the most famous of them all, of course, King Midas, whose one great wish was that everything he touched should turn to gold. And as every other school child knows, it worked brilliantly for a while, and then he came to grief.
In so many ways, the story of Greece is a modern morality tale. This small country could have had a modestly prosperous economy, but in its desperation to join the euro, Greece cooked the books, and in its thirst to expand, the EU turned a blind eye. When all that cheap borrowing was thrust at them, the Greeks grabbed it and spent it. But when the bills started coming in, they couldn't pay. Greece is a country that knows about suffering. The Nazi occupation was perhaps the most brutal in Europe. At least 200,000 people starved to death, many more were murdered. And with the Allied victory there came not peace, but savage civil war. Nationalist forces supported by the Allies defeated the communists, but then, after 2 decades, the army took over. A ruthless military dictatorship ruled until 1974, when the people overthrew the generals and opted for democracy. And now there is a new enemy. Austerity does not pick and choose its victims. You sense that some people are beginning to lose the will to fight, but not all.
Something quite extraordinary is happening here. All over the country, volunteer organizations are springing up to help the people in the most desperate need, stepping in where the state has failed.
This may look like any other small corner shop, but it's not. Its goods are given away to families who can't afford even the basic necessities. Melina Tezaki was only 14 when she told her mother Ruby she should set up a charity to help the most needy. That was 4 years ago.
Today, they are inscribed 4,500 people. Every day we have about 60 or 70 families in need.
New families.
New families.
Asking for your help.
Yes, that's a bad surprise.
In a sense, I suppose, there is a kind of citizens' army being formed here of volunteers who are saying, states let us down, so we will get together and do it ourselves.
When your house is in fire, you don't stay desperate. You do something, and that's what we do.
Ruby's operation expands by the day. It has to. Unemployment in Greece is now at 20%. Benefits now stop after a year. More and more once middle-class families are falling into poverty. This apartment is home to a bookkeeper who's been unemployed since her firm went bust. Her husband's a builder who's had hardly any work in the past 2 years. They're thousands of euros in debt. Were it not for the charity, their 3 children would go hungry. Moments of fun like this are rare, but the help is not just welcome, it's essential.
You have small children. How important is all of this to you? How would you manage without all of this?
Δεν ξέρω. Είναι πολύ σημαντικό.
I don't know, because we're going through a tough time.
Πάρα πολύ δύσκολα.
My husband's out of work. I'm out of work. We only have my mother's pension of 400 euros a month.
300 ευρώ. Δεν φτάνουνε.
It's not enough.
Σήμερα ήταν μία από τις μέρες.
Today I had no food to cook. I didn't know how I was going to feed the children.
Να φτιάξω για φαΐ για να φάνε τα παιδιά.
It's very hard.
What is the worst thing about being as poor as you are now?
Δεν να προσφέρω κάτι στα παιδιά μου.
It's put a strain on the relationship with my husband. We're like two strangers.
Έχει κάνει σαν να είμαστε ξένοι. Δεν ξέρω.
I don't know.
Μερικές φορές σκέφτομαι ότι καλύτερα να πεθάνω.
Τη δικτατορία θυμάμαι.
I remember life under the generals. This is worse.
Δεν είναι ωραία αυτή.
These are not good times to live in.
Δεν έχει δουλειά.
Before there was work, times were different.
Υπήρχανε, δουλεύανε, δεν ξέρω.
Sometimes Maria has to send her children to school without food, and Greece doesn't do free school dinners. In the poorest areas, teachers talk of children fainting in the classroom because they're not getting enough to eat. But it's when children get sick that the real horror of the spending cuts kicks in. Opposite this children's hospital, Konstantina Gavrou runs a pharmacy, but the national fund which supplies pharmacists is failing, and they're losing the battle to buy the drugs the patients desperately need.
It really is the case that children's hospital, just on the other side of the square from here, there are parents who are being given drugs for their children with cancer, and they have to share them with other parents whose children have cancer.
The parents of these children across the street open a packet of medication and just hand out pills. It's not candy, it's medicine. Now I blame myself. I don't actually serve the people. I just add to their misery.
How will this problem be resolved? Because the Greek government cannot allow many people to die because they don't get the drugs, surely.
We are paying large interest payments while children at school don't have books. And now there are no medicines. Something is not right.
What effect does this have on you as somebody who's been a pharmacist for some years now, made your life as a pharmacist?
Actually, this, I can tell it in English. I cannot sleep. During the night, I'm feeling terrible. I don't know if it is my fault and how I can solve this problem. But when I wake up in the morning, I realize that this is not from me, but I have to find a solution as a citizen.
Dina Creara works in the pharmacy dispensing medicines, but there's a vicious irony here. She herself has a potentially fatal heart problem, and in spite of being surrounded by drugs, she struggles to obtain the ones she needs.
Ακόμα και σήμερα που σας μιλάω, δεν έχω πάρει τα φάρμακά μου.
Even as we speak, I haven't had my medications for this month. I can't live without them.
Εντός εισαγωγικών, μια κανονική.
I need them.
Τα χρειάζομαι.
Are you frightened?
Ναι.
Yes, very frightened.
Pharmacies without medicines, schools without books, families without food. Greece is failing against these fundamental measures of civilization. Will this really be the country in which my grandchildren will grow up, where some say it's even worse than it was under the generals? How can things have gone so horribly wrong? The public coffers are empty, yet vast private wealth remains evident here. But just try getting the rich to foot the bills.
If the myth of Midas serves as one useful metaphor for what's happened to Greece, the myth of Sisyphus might serve as another. He's the bloke, you'll remember, who was given the job of rolling the boulder up the hill, and every time it got anywhere near the top, it rolled right back down again.
Diomidis Spinellis can relate to that. He's a professor of software engineering, and he was asked by the Greek government to help get people to pay their taxes. He designed a system to identify potential evaders, particularly among the very rich.
When I started in 2009, I was extremely optimistic. I saw a number of low-hanging fruit. I thought I can just grab them and it's a done deal. Because you see people, for instance, having flashy cars. Why shouldn't they have a flashy tax return indicating that they're doing their bit to help their state?
But when Spinellis told the government and the tax offices what was going on, nothing happened. Exasperated, he designed a second program to monitor the tax collectors themselves. They didn't like that. Some wanted to guard the corrupt culture of kickbacks with which they feathered their own nests. Spinellis was sued by the Tax Collectors Union.
If the tax collectors themselves don't accept that things are so badly wrong and must be changed, how will it ever be changed?
By the end of my term, I was considering that the existing system cannot be changed gradually in such a way. It would be better to create a new tax collection authority.
So you wanted an earthquake, in effect. You wanted to blow the whole thing up and start again, and what we've seen is a tremor.
I think an earthquake is needed in order to bring this system under control. It could bring a great amount of revenue in the order of 10 billions of euros.
In other words, it could make a significant contribution to ending the crisis that Greece is in now.
Yes, it would.
But it's not happening.
Not yet. I'm always hopeful.
Seeing how Greece has been governed by the two main parties over the years reminds me of the way some of the worst local councils in Britain were run when I was a young reporter. But this is a country with an ancient history, strategically important, whose future matters to all of us. Can it really continue like this? One man who benefited from the Greek boom is Konstantin Mikalos. He's an influential businessman. He's now president of the Chambers of Commerce.
Where is the evidence that the Greek people are prepared to say, OK, we will do things differently from now on?
First of all, let's get one thing right. This is not a Greek crisis. And I think that this has been proved very clearly over the last few months when we've seen economic powers such as Italy or Spain.
It's not exclusively a Greek crisis,
Precisely.
I will grant you that, but you are in an enormous mess.
Yes, I will agree that Greece is responsible for its own internal affairs. We didn't use the European funds in the correct way.
It was squandered and there was corruption
Precisely.
and all the rest of it. So my question remains, how do you change that mentality? What is the evidence that it's changing?
By changing the political system in Greece. You cannot possibly convince the Greek people with politicians that are the main reason, the cause that have brought us where we are
and
today.
who are totally discredited.
Those, precisely, because those who have brought us to where we are today cannot possibly be expected to be the visionaries of tomorrow.
But after last weekend's general election, it's the old guard running the show once again. New Democracy and PASOK in coalition. The very parties who got Greece into this mess over the past 4 decades.
This is a victory for all Europe. I will make sure that the sacrifices of the Greek people will bring the country back to prosperity.
But how much more sacrifice will Greece tolerate? And those who voted most were against the austerity package. There's now a powerful opposition in Parliament. The left-wing grouping called Syriza sworn to rip up the bailout plan. They came a close second. And on the extreme right, Golden Dawn cemented the gains they made last time with a worrying 7% of the popular vote. Their single issue, immigration. At this rally, Afghan immigrants are protesting against what they call the neo-Nazis. They feel they've been made a political scapegoat for the country's troubles. But when Golden Dawn invited us to film them before the election, they tried to sell us a rather different message. Things had got so bad, they said, that little old ladies asked to be escorted to the cash point.
I'm scared. They hit me, they pinch.
Who are they?
Pakistan?
Not Greek people?
No, never. It's not a Greek. And these people it's all right. When I want to go to the bank, they can do people with me. I don't worry.
The Golden Dawn MP Yanni Voldis boasted to me that it took his men to rid this neighborhood of the unwanted immigrants.
They asked for Golden Dawn's help, so we helped. Eventually, there were fewer immigrants. And with police assisting in the end, we cleared the square out.
What about Pakistanis or Indians or Africans who have come to live in Greece legally?
There aren't any legal ones, or very few. They pretend they come from countries with internal problems, like war, persecution, and they stay here creating ghettos.
Do you regard fascism as an evil doctrine?
The things that Hitler did, if we are talking about here in Greece, Of course they were bad. On the other hand, history is always written by the winners.
You don't believe that Hitler created the ultimate crime against the Jewish people, the crime of genocide?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know, but everyone has the right to reconsider history.
Golden Dawn's emergence in this of all countries where Nazi occupation survives in living memory is alarming. But for every choreographed PR stunt like the one I saw, there's been a high-profile media blunder. Like when one of their MPs assaulted a woman on national television, then went on the run. This party now holds 18 seats in the new parliament. It's not only the far right that's benefited from this crisis. People distrust conventional politics, and the danger is that violence like these scenes from last winter will return. The people of Athens are well used to the sight of riot police on their streets. These are a pretty permanent fixture on the border of Athens' Exarchia neighborhood, where ordinary police officers no longer patrol because they're nervous of stirring up trouble. I met a group of young activists here last week. What happened at the election is precisely what they told me they would not tolerate. With half of all under 25s out of work, what they want is revolution.
All revolutions are almost always preceded by violence. At what point are young people in Greece going to take to the streets?
400 euro salaries and unemployment are acts of violence. Under these terms, we advocate an uprising.
This is a crisis of the capitalism itself. It's a crisis of that system of producing and consuming. And I believe that most young people, they try to think of another way to lead.
Anger at measures that young people feel have robbed them of their future may well fuel more unrest. And things are not going to get better. A fifth of all public sector workers are set to be laid off, the equivalent of 1 million jobs in the UK.
So, are you saying that this, in a way, is the lost generation in Greece?
Of course, our generation is a generation that they have nothing. There are no future, no jobs, no work, no universities, no public health, nothing. We have just to rise up and fight for some things that we need for living, for our lives.
The spirit of resistance has never died in Greece. If one man embodies that spirit, it is Manolis Glessos, a national hero who can't walk the streets without being applauded. He's the man who risked his life when he tore down the swastika from the Acropolis in 1943. Who fought in the Civil War, who was locked up by the generals, who was elected to the European Parliament, and who is still fighting, still demonstrating, and still in tune with the people of Greece in his loathing of what everyone here calls the Troika. The EU, the European Central Bank, and the IMF. They are seen as the oppressors, and at the heart of the Troika is, of course, the old enemy, Germany. I talked to Mr. Glessos before the election.
Of course, today there is no occupation. Are German soldiers here? No. But the German mentality prevails. The Greek people are not responsible for the crisis. It was caused by the financial system. The Greeks didn't cure it. Yet they were forced by the Troika and its agents to stamp up, to cut pensions, benefits and salaries. All they have gained so far.
But many people on the outside, in Germany, in Britain, in many other countries, look at Greece and say it is at least partly the fault of the Greek people because they haven't paid their taxes. They wanted the good life without paying the bills.
Greek people pay their tax. It's big capital that doesn't pay tax. The bankers don't pay tax. The financial institutions don't pay tax. That's the difference.
This country has suffered 3 great crises just in my lifetime: Nazi occupation, civil war, military dictatorship. It overcame all that, embraced democracy, and for the last generation it's enjoyed a period of unprecedented stability and prosperity. The danger of this present crisis is that all that may be undone.
Greece has a new government committed to austerity. It believes there is no alternative. As the cuts bite ever deeper, the people of Greece may take a different view. And if they do, it will have consequences for all of us. Next week, Panorama goes undercover to find out who's cold calling you and reveals how some firms tear up not just the phone book,
so people who have called Edwards,
but also the rule book that's meant to protect consumers.
How is the crisis in Europe affecting us in Britain? Join the Newsnight debate at 10:30 over on BBC Two. Next year on BBC One, the traffic cops are out in force. Or on BBC Four now, behind the glamour, the stark reality of life as a girl model in Japan in a new film from Storyville.